Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 11th of September of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. When talking about Kherson, we haven't received many updates from this bridgehead. The Russians as usually continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions along the bank of the Dnipro river, along the Ukrainian one, usually, and the Russians continue attacks the settlements like Berislav, Kazatsk, Lvov. For example, on this video we see how the Russians managed to discover another radar or communication equipment, and as a result of artillery strike or FPV drone strike, the Russians managed to destroy it. Also, the Russians continue bombing the islands between the banks of Dnipro river along the Dnipro. On this video we can see that how the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian reconnaissance team among the islands, and as a result of FAP 250 strike, probably that group was destroyed or at least were forced to step back. So no changes, nothing important, and as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost 20 soldiers and 5 armored vehicles, according to the Ministry of Defense. More important and interesting updates are coming from Bradley Square, from Robotyne Verbove area. Today the Russians FPV drone squad Babry published another video, additional video of full fire control over this sector of this foothold of this battle. Today we got more updates how the Russians were attacking and bombing the Ukrainian light vehicles, armored vehicles, tanks, just regular cars that Ukrainians were using for rotation purposes to redeploy forces to get some munition, food and something like this, and all those cars were under very heavy fire of FPV drone strikes. And this is a very big problem that Ukrainians still haven't managed to resolve. Still, this is a very big issue for them because they continue sending more and more forces, and that means that Ukrainians still have losses along the main supply road. And I'll remind you that the Ukrainians still use this road between Novodonetske and Robotyne as the main supply road, and for different purposes, for rotations, for munitions and so on. And as we can see, these territories are located very close to the Russian positions, so that's why the Russians don't have problems at all to establish complete fire control over this territory and to destroy almost every single day more and more armored vehicles of Ukrainian forces. Furthermore, those forces of the Ukrainian army who are able to bypass these like dangerous area, usually the Russians get them somewhere between Verbove and Robotyne. For example, in this video we see another very interesting video how another Ukrainian tank was trying to bypass these fields and to go in direction of Verbove, but at some point of its journey, tank got on the minefield and was destroyed. And the author of this video claims that the Russians continue using the distance mining method, and the Russians still continue mine the fields, which brings more losses almost every single day for the Ukrainians. So the situation is very difficult, yet the Ukrainians haven't found a solution how to solve all these issues, and they continue sending forces in this direction. When talking about the Battle of Verbove, we got very interesting and important detail, geolocation published by the 46th Air Mobile Brigade, and on this video we see how the Ukrainian FPV drone was trying to hit and to attack the Russian trenches, the Russian positions on the western part of Verbove. We're using this video just for the learning purposes to understand and for informational purposes to understand the current Russian positions. And according to the latest geolocations from this foothold, the Russians have 100% control over the northern and west-northern part of Verbove. Also, interesting details are coming from the southern direction, and the Ukrainians during the previous days managed to bypass the Russians' minefields, Russian fortifications, artillery strikes, and as a result of all this redeployment, they managed to capture the foothold just by the infantry. They controls the forest lines that located on the east of Novoprokopovka. I believe that the Ukrainians are not going to stop, and the Ukrainians will try to continue their offensive operation. And of course, their main objective is to capture the next defense belt with more powerful fortifications in trenches where the Ukrainian soldiers will be able to to have some positions just to hide from the Russian artillery systems, from the Russian bombings and drones and so on. On this video we can see how the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian machine gun positions that was located along the forest line. The machine gunner was trying to hit the Russian soldiers, and after that the Russians took a decision to destroy that position. So anyway, as we can see, when I'm talking, if underline, the Ukrainians still haven't solved their main problem. They haven't secured the western flank of supply road, and this situation leads to significant losses. I'm not saying that like 90% of everything that goes to the south is destroyed in along these ways, but anyway, 20-30% at least are damaged during this way or destroyed. So, and this is a very big losses. When talking about Novoprokopovka, Robotyne, there are no changes about these cities. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, at least in this direction, on Zaporozhye direction, the Ukrainians lost 145 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles and 4 artillery systems. The Ukrainians from their side continue attacking the Russian hidden artillery positions with HIMARS missiles. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians managed to discover another operational ammo depot or artillery positions with some ammo fully loaded, and as a result of HIMARS strike that system was destroyed, and then we see the secondary detonation of munition. Now we are moving further to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. Today we also got a lot of updates from this territory. The Ukrainians continue attacking the Russian positions in Novomayorsk and Novodonetske, and currently the Ukrainians have significant problems in this bridgehead. Yes, as a result of clashes during the previous days, they managed to penetrate the Russians' defense belt and probably to establish some positions in the northwestern part of Novomayorsk. But the situation in this area is the same situation as in the vicinity and the Bradley Square. The problem is that Ukrainians almost every single day use the same roads, the same ways to attack Novodonetsk and Novomayorsk. And of course you can't create something new because the front line is very short and there are not many ways, not many options how to attack these two settlements. For example, when talking about Novodonetsk, the Ukrainians every single day use the same road to attack. First, they're moving from Zolotaya Niva to the west and somewhere in this direction. Then the Ukrainians turn their forces to the south. In this area, there is a small pontoon bridge, and using this pontoon bridge, they cross this river. And after that they're moving to the south. And for example, in this area, the Ukrainians, this is like the first point where the Ukrainians try to concentrate their forces, to regroup and to collect those forces who were able to bypass this way and not being attacked, not being destroyed by the Russian forces. For example, today the Russians published another video how they discovered another concentration of Ukrainian forces on the west of Novodonetsk, and after that the Russians attacked this accumulation of forces with artillery, and probably the Ukrainians were forced to step back. Anyway, those who can survive after this journey continue their movement to the south, exactly to the next forest line. And on this point, the Ukrainians usually turn to the east in direction of Novodonetsk, and from this perspective, using this road, the Ukrainians try to encircle and try to cut Novodonetsk from supply and support and to storm the settlement. So this is basically the Ukrainian step, that the Ukrainian path, the Ukrainian way that they repeat every single day. The difference between, let's say, yesterday's journey and today's journey is that the Ukrainians were destroyed at different point of this way. For example, a few days ago, using the same way, the Ukrainians managed to get almost Novodonetsk, and most of their forces in armored fist were destroyed like few hundred kilometers before the settlement. So on this video we see that it was published on the 5th of September how the Russians managed to discover and destroy another Ukrainian armored fist that was heading in direction of the settlement. So this is the thing, and the main reason the Ukrainians offensive tactics have a lot of benefits, of course, but the biggest negative side is that if they are not able to capture settlement within one attack, then they need to use the same roads every single day. And using the same road of attack every single day gives the Russians possibilities to establish full fire artillery control over the road. And every single day the Ukrainians get more and more losses because the Russians can attack them. Because the Russians basically know. They know everything, where the Ukrainians are going, where their main direction, and so on. When talking about Novomayorsk, there is the same situation, the same story. The Ukrainians use almost the same way to attack. First, they start their attack from Prichistovka. They're getting this forest line. On this forest line, they're going to the south. Then they move to the west. From this direction, they're moving to the south also, and at this point the Ukrainians try to split their forces into parts. The first one moves strictly to the south in direction of Novomayorsk. The second one goes a little bit to the west. There is another pontoon bridge. They cross the river and attack the Russians also from the west or southwest. So these are the movements of Ukrainian forces. And of course, one more time, as a result of first attack, the Ukrainians haven't managed to capture the settlement to force the Russians to step back, and that situation allowed the Russians to establish full fire control over the Ukrainian roads, over their positions, and almost every single day we're receiving more and more videos of another failed Ukrainian attempt to attack. For example, today there was a video, this battle took place a few hours ago. The Ukrainians sent another few tanks, RAP, armored vehicle, personal carrier. At some point of this attack, the Russians managed to discover them and made artillery strike, and a lot of armored vehicles were damaged, a lot of infantry were wounded, and basically the Ukrainians were forced to step back that attack, and they were forced to step back because of failure of the first hours of attacks. A little bit to the south, the Russians destroyed another armored Ukrainian vehicle who was trying to cross pontoon bridge, but as a result of artillery strike, that machine was damaged, and the Ukrainians also were forced to step back. If we increase the number of updates since the beginning of September, we see the configuration of the battle. We see the Ukrainian roads, the ways of their attack, and they're moving the same direction. For example, this video was published yesterday. The Ukrainians using the same way, the same road, were trying to move some forces. This road is under complete fire control. We see a lot of destroyed armored vehicles, a lot of destroyed tanks, and so on. And this is not the main problem. The main problem is not that this situation started yesterday and tomorrow the situation will be finished and the Ukrainians will find another tactics. No, it's not like this. For example, when these offensive operations started in the direction of Novomayorsk, the beginning of that operation started somewhere on the 5th of September. So the first day of that attack, and we got the first video how the Ukrainians were trying to move to the south, and they were attacked by the Russian artillery system. And starting from the 5th of September, the Ukrainians were repeating and repeating the same situation, the same story, every single day, having significant losses, and the most important, without artillery superiority. You can do these attacks every single day only if you have artillery superiority, because these attack roads should be under complete protection of Ukrainian artillery. HIMARS systems, M77 howitzer, Palladians, D20, D13, Stab-B howitzers, but we see complete absence of Ukrainian artillery systems, which allow the Russians to establish full fire control without any risks, without any danger from the Ukrainian side. As a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 160 soldiers, 6 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery systems on Stab-B. Now we're moving to Donetsk direction, and we continue receiving a lot of updates from Robotyne. Today, a lot of Russian sources reported that Ukrainians launched a very unexpected attack in direction of the settlement, and as a result of that attack, some Russian forces were forced to step back, and the Ukrainians managed to establish control over the edgy position of the settlement. Later, somewhere at 8 p.m. of the local time, the Russians reported that they managed to counterattack and to force the Ukrainians to step back, but I assume that we need to wait a little bit, because sometimes the Russians are saying that they counterattack and force the Ukrainians to step back, and sometimes this is just a regular military routine. We need to wait a little bit, because this is a very important settlement. The Russians spell a lot of blood during the battle of the settlement, and it will be very probably, I will be very surprised if the Russians lose the settlement as a result of such a small, probably unexpected attack from the Ukrainian side. When talking about Donetsk direction, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes on Donetsk and Klishchiivka area, the Ukrainians lost 200 soldiers, 8 armored vehicles and 1 artillery system. When talking about Klishchiivka area, there are no changes on the ground, just artillery duels and so on. The Ukrainians, of course, do have long-range artillery superiority. Today they published another video how they managed to discover and to destroy the Russian Grad system that the Russians were using to support their forces in the vicinity of Andreevka. And this is like artillery superiority. This is HIMARS missiles, of course, so the Russians can't do anything with this. And when talking about the low distance and middle distance, the Ukrainians continue using their drones to attack the Russian tanks, the Russian positions in the vicinity of Andreevka. When talking about Andreevka itself, we haven't received nothing during the day, so I assume that Ukrainians probably were trying to collect some forces to concentrate, to create some critical mass, but anyway, they can't stay there for a long time. They need to push and to establish control over the settlement. If they can't do this, if they're not able to do this by the end of this week, probably they will be forced to step back. Also, the Russians published a lot of videos how they were attacking and bombing the Ukrainians' armored vehicles in the vicinity of Mayorska. These are abandoned armored vehicles that the Russians understand they can't evacuate, so that's why they took a decision to destroy the abandoned equipment, because you know that this is probably one of the powerful side of Ukrainian military forces. They do know and how to evacuate and how to repair armored vehicles, and this is like their benefits, and this is their powerful side when talking about the military situation. And there are very fierce clashes on the northern part of Artyomovsk in the vicinity of Verbove, Vasilievka, Berkhovka. Main clashes took place along the railways, and mainly the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces along the railways, forcing them to step back. A lot of losses, a lot of artillery bombings, and of course a lot of casualties among the Ukrainian soldiers without any progress on the ground for both sides. When talking about Liman area, Tarskoye salient, today we got updates, and the Russians intensified their actions in the Kherson forest. Today there was a very long video how the Russian troopers were storming another stronghold of Ukrainian forces in the forest. As a result of that attack, very powerful stronghold was captured, but the problem of Kherson forest and of this stronghold is that this is not the last stronghold in Kherson forest. There are hundreds of such strongholds under Ukrainian control, and if the Russians will continue moving in Kherson forest the same way, probably they're gonna need 2 or 3 years until they're able to clear the entire forest. So I don't expect that the main battle for this front line is going to take part in the forest, because it's like at least useless waste of time. Another tank, Ukrainian tank, was destroyed somewhere among the forest lines in the same direction. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on Liman front line, the Ukrainians lost 70 soldiers. So the level of losses, as we can see, is pretty high in comparison to the previous day. Now we're going to the Kupiansk direction. Today we got a very interesting geolocation that was published by the Ukrainian forces, and we are talking about this situation. The Ukrainian soldiers from this direction published a video of how they were bombing and attacking the Russian position using artillery systems. And this is the video, and this is the geolocation, this one. And as you can see, according to this video, according to this geolocation, this one, the Russians have already established control over this intersection of roads. So basically, and this is the first probably geolocation confirmation of the Russian progress in this direction. And this situation, this video tells us that either the Russians have already entered Sinkovka and the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the Russian positions like behind, trying to establish control over the main supply road that the Russians use to reinforce and to support their forces inside of the settlement, or the Ukrainians were attacking the edge Russian positions. Anyway, the battle for Sinkovka has officially started, because we received the first normal geolocation that shows that the Russians are either in front of the settlement or is already inside of the settlement. When talking about geolocation, the Russians is in front of the settlement, and there are no more barriers between the Russians and the Ukrainian positions in Sinkovka itself. So the battle for Kupiansk officially has started, as I understand. Not just like the Ministry of Defense reports and so on, a real normal video geolocation, very fresh one. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in this direction, the Ukrainians lost another 80 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. As you can see, the level of losses also is very heavy in comparison with the previous days. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you can condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.